All right, next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So, acknowledging guidance from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the city begins its meetings with a land acknowledgement, and I'd like to read that now. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And now I will hand it over to Councillor Councillor John Fillion of Ward 11, to provide some opening remarks. Councillor.
Thanks. Yes, I won't be long. This is, we've had several earlier meetings discussing plans for the site. This is a planning meeting because the city is proceeding with a rezoning. I just look forward to any comments or questions, and I'll pass it back over to you, Franca, to get on with the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So let's take a look at the agenda for the evening. We're here to talk about, to hear from the city about some details around the project. I'm going to start by introducing the panelists and taking a look at the different items that will be part of a presentation. We'll start with the presentation. It's a two-part presentation, an overview of the project, as well as a planning portion of the presentation. And then we will move to the question and answer portion. I've already identified that we're going to be taking questions in a variety of formats. So that's how the evening will get going. We expect to give the better part of an hour to questions and answers. So we'll try and get started with the presentation portion and have that wrapped up in about half an hour. We will be hearing and seeing from a number of city staff, and others will be introduced as we move along, but we will have an opportunity to hear from many members of the public. We've got good participation, over 100 participants. So just to identify what the agenda and what the main purpose of the discussion is this evening, we're here to hear from the city some details around the project, updates on the status for the modular housing proposal at 175 Cummer, as the project goes through a municipal planning and rezoning process. First, there will be an update from the Housing Secretariat, who are leading the project, and then we'll turn it over to City of Toronto Planning to get into some of the details about the rezoning components. And then we'll move into the question and answer portion of the evening, and we'll alternate between those different formats for the questions. And with that said, I'm going to begin by introducing Abby Bond, Executive Director of the Housing Secretariat. So Abby, just want to wave and say hello.
Hi.
Great. Next slide, please. And we also have Matt Armstrong, a Senior Planner with the Strategic Initiatives Branch, City Planning. Matt, are you there?
Good evening, everyone.
Terrific. So, as mentioned, other city staff are available to answer questions, but Matt and Abby will be walking us through the presentations, so we'll begin with them. Again, my name is Franca DiGiovanni, and I'm happy to host the meeting this evening. I'm with a third party, Lura Consulting, and we are working on behalf of the City of Toronto to host this meeting this evening. Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to just identify that we will, of course, be having many people participate this evening. We want to be respectful of all participants and panelists. We do not want to speculate about people who will be assisted by the housing. We're going to ask all participants to please be concise, constructive in your comments, and considerate of other views. We would make it easier for all participants if you phrase your comments in the form of a question, so that we can address it specifically and have it addressed specifically by staff. We're going to ask that people be limiting their comments and questions to about 2 minutes per person, because we do have many participants this evening who are likely to want to have an opportunity to speak. So in order to get to the most people as possible, we're really going to ask you to be brief and focused in your comments. We're also going to ask the same from panelists when addressing the questions. Of course, discriminatory or abusive language of any kind will not be tolerated. Commenters who are using discriminatory language will be interrupted, and you may be asked to refocus your comments. We're aiming toward a civil conversation that allows for a safe virtual dialogue with all points of view. Next slide, please. As outlined, we're sharing the status of the proposed rezoning, status of the MZO, some details about the planning process and the components of the planning process, an update on the status of selection of the housing provider, and giving an opportunity to answer community questions. We will not be able to go into detail about tenant selection process, even while we will take an opportunity to give some context for how people in supportive housing, some of the wraparound services that might be offered, or some of how the Secretariat handles and is accommodating to people seeking supportive housing. And with that, I will turn it over to Abby to begin this portion of the presentation, please.
Thank you, Franca, and good evening, everyone. So I want to start by talking about our Housing TO plan. This is a plan, a 10-year plan, which really guides the work that the Housing Secretariat do and the City of Toronto does in relation to housing. One of our key focuses in the plan is responding to the fact that there are more than 8,000 people experiencing homelessness in Toronto. These people come from different backgrounds. They're often seniors, they could be single mothers, people with mental health and also physical health challenges. We find people sleeping outside in vehicles, on people's couches, in shelters, and in parks as well. So there are many different ways that people find their way into homelessness, but there's really only one way out. And we, as the City of Toronto, maintain that adequate, safe, and affordable housing is essential to a person's dignity and well-being, and that all residents should have an equal opportunity to thrive and develop to their full potential. So creating supportive housing is identified as a priority in our 10-year plan, and our aim is to provide 18,000 new supportive homes in 10 years. These are homes with supports that provide people in need with good quality, safe, affordable, and permanent homes. Okay, next slide, please. So to do that, back in December of 2020, the city launched our 24-month housing and homelessness recovery and response plan with the aim of expediting 2,000 of that 18,000 homes within 24 months. Again, providing a rapid and dignified response to the challenges that many people in our city face in relation to housing. We looked at increasing that supply through modular housing, through the acquisition of existing buildings. And as this map highlights, since December 2020, we have led the development of 11 supportive housing projects in 10 different wards across the city. 3 projects are complete and another 8 is underway. And this site we're talking about tonight is one of the 8 underway. Next slide, please. So here is a timeline for you in terms of where we're at with our process. Throughout this process and through all of the community meetings that we had in March of 2021, April of 2021, and August of 2021, we're here again in April 2022 having a discussion about the design and planning for this site. Throughout this process, we've also been engaged with residents of Willowdale Manor, and we've also been accessible via email and phone throughout the community liaison, and also provided an opportunity for residents to speak to council members at the Planning and Housing Committee. Councillor Fillion has also held workshops with resident groups and with stakeholders. So in June of 2021, Council adopted the final report for this site and requested the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing make a ministerial zoning order, or MZO, to permit the proposed development. Since that time, an MZO has not been made or received, and so in order to now proceed quickly with the development of these much needed homes, in March of 2022, City Council directed staff to initiate a municipal rezoning process for this development. The final rezoning report will be brought to the April 27th meeting of the Planning and Housing Committee, and staff will proceed with the proposed development and expect the building to be complete, subject to that decision, and so that expect the building to be complete and begin occupancy towards the end of 2022, so that we can provide 59 new homes for people experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please. So a little bit about what is supportive housing. It really is a place, a rental housing building where people can live independently with supports provided on site. This enables people to stay housed and also improve their health and well-being. We will work with a nonprofit housing and support services provider through an RFP process to ensure that there are a full range of support services provided on site that meet tenants' needs and also support positive housing and health outcomes. Some core services include 24/7 staffing on site, housing stability and eviction prevention services, mental health and substance use services, connection to primary care, harm reduction if required, support with daily living activities, connections with community supports, including volunteer and employment opportunities, food security programs, and income assistance programs. Okay. So here is an update on our request for proposals process. This is how we will get a qualified nonprofit operator to take over this building. So we plan to issue an RFP for a nonprofit operator later in April, and ensuring that we have an operator in place by the summer of 2022 to begin preparing to take over the completed building later this year. So we've recently completed the selection of other housing, and so we've learned a lot from those RFPs that we've done. And due to the proximity of the site adjacent to kind of Cummer Lodge and also Willowdale Manor, through the RFP, we'll be looking for partners who can build partnerships with those sites and also who have experience and potentially funding for working with older adults and seniors. Okay, and with that, I will hand back to you, Franca. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Abby. As mentioned, this is a two-part presentation. So that is the first portion, and now we'll hand it over to Matt Armstrong to go through the city planning presentation. Matt, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Armstrong. I'm a senior planner working in city planning for the City of Toronto, so I am a city employee. I'll be going over the site context, the planning framework, previous consultation and revisions, details of the proposed development, reasons for the rezoning, and some next steps. I'm going to be speaking for about 20 minutes, so you can set your timers now. And if I'm a few minutes either side, I hope you can forgive me. After I finish speaking, you'll have an opportunity for a question and comment. Slide, please. So I'm going to start off with the site context. The site is located at the intersection of Cummer Avenue and Willowdale Avenue. There's a park to the south of it named Newton Brook, and there's the Newton Brook Trail that goes in behind as well. About a 10-minute walk away are the retail and services along Yonge Street. Slide. Low-rise housing in a detached form is located north and west of the site, so in houses. On site, there's a 4-story apartment building, and there's also a 4-story seniors residence to the east. TTC bus routes 42 and 98 with stops at the intersection of Cummer and Willowdale are right there with connection to the subway. The site is approximately 180 meters deep by 110 meters deep. And just for context, that's quite large. Old City Hall could fit in there 1.5 times roughly. And the site slopes south towards the ravine. Planning framework. Planning in Ontario is a policy-led setup. At the top, we have provincial statutes, including, please, no, hold on, go back, go back. Thank you. At the very top, we have the Planning Act, and the planning, what's happening? Could we go back to that slide? Was that an advancing slide? It should have been individual slides. Anyway, it's a policy-led system, Planning Act at the very top. Below the Planning Act are provincial policies and plans. Under that is the Toronto Official Plan, within which there are secondary plans in some areas within the city. Secondary plans, secondary plans add a greater level of specificity to the official plan. They're not secondary to them, they add more detail. So beneath secondary plans are, area studies, precinct plans, those kinds of things. But all of that happens first. And below that is the zoning. So a lot of decisions, a lot of direction comes first before we get to the detail of zoning. Beyond zoning, there are things like the site plan and then going to a building permit. So provincial policy statement at the top provides policy direction for the province regarding matters of provincial interest. It directs key land use planning issues that affect communities, such as the efficient use and management of land and infrastructure, opportunities for economic development and job creation, and protection of the environment. All decisions of the municipality, all of them, shall be consistent with the PPS. Slide. The growth plan, which is short for the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, builds on the PPS and adds more specificity. It sets direction on how to support economic prosperity, protect the environment, and help communities achieve a high quality of life. The growth plan sets out where and how to grow over the long term. Again, all decisions in the municipality must conform with the growth plan. Below that is the official plan. So just to keep score of where we're at, there's the provincial policy statement, which is across the entirety of the province. Then there's the growth plan, which gets a little more specific for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which includes Toronto. And now we're at the official plan, which gets even more specifically for the City of Toronto. So this is the official plan for the City of Toronto. An official plan is city direction and it's a legal document. It sets out where and how to grow over a long period and covers where and how to grow, how to use land in the city. The official plan consists of a series of chapters, sections, and policies, and I've highlighted a few here that I consider to be relevant towards this proposal. Section 312 of the built form directs buildings to be built parallel to streets to preserve trees where possible. It also directs amenity spaces to be included in multi-unit housing. Section 313 regarding low-rise apartments indicates that low-rise apartments are no taller than 4 stories. They are to provide entrances that directly access public streets and ensure daylight and privacy on ground floor units through measures such as appropriate facing distances. What that means is facing distances, one building face to another building face. Slide. Section 3.321 indicates that housing, it outlines that housing is an adequate and affordable housing is a basic requirement for everyone. A specific policy within that section directs a full range of housing in terms of form, tenure, and affordability. The official plan includes a whole bunch of maps, as you imagine, because planners love maps. One of the most commonly used ones is the land use map, and this map indicates the land use designations on particular areas of land. The color yellow here, which is what the site is the neighborhood's land use designation. Slide. Neighborhoods are physically stable areas with residential uses, including low-rise apartments up to 4 stories. There's a policy 419, which sets out criteria for sites and neighborhoods on sites that vary from their surrounding context in terms of lot size, configuration, or orientation. Why am I telling you that? Well, I'm telling you that because in the area, we have houses on lots across the street. Those lots are all comparable size, a house on a lot beside a house on a lot beside a house on a lot. But 175 Cummer is on a much, much larger lot. So the official plan directs us what to do in such a situation. So the development criteria in policy 419 says, height, massing, scale must be respectful of that permitted in zoning on nearby sites while considering the form of development on the site. So for example, directly across the street, the zoning permits up to 11 meters for houses on those lots. It also says that setbacks from residential properties and streets should be proportionate to those permitted in zoning on nearby sites, again, while considering context on the site. Providing adequate privacy, sunlight, and sky view by ensuring adequate distance between buildings and employing landscaping and fencing. To front onto public streets and provide safe, accessible walkways to streets, and to locate, screen, and enclose servicing, including garbage storage. So finally, we're getting to zoning. All of that was policy and direction from upper levels of the planning policy framework. So on this particular site, the zoning that is applicable is City of Toronto Harmonized Zoning Bylaw 569/2013, and the label is Residential Multiple, or RM. You can see on this map directly across the street, the label is different. It's RD, which is residential detached. So on this site, the zone permits residential dwellings in detached, semi-detached, duplex, triplex, fourplex, and apartment building forms. This was before we started this whole process. That's what the zoning label says. Now there's a nuance there, and I'm going to get to details of that in just a moment, but I wanted to provide that context. So previous consultation and revisions to the proposal. Previous consultation on March 10th, 2021, City Council directed staff to pursue a request to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing to make a minister's zoning order to permit the proposed development. MZOs offer a potentially expedited way to offer zoning relief in urgent situations. Again, what I'm telling you here is that your elected officials directed staff, that includes myself, to advance forward with an MZO. So that's what we were doing starting in March 10th, 2021. Now, on the third bullet point, while there is no required consultation to pursue an MZO, and I want to emphasize that point because I've been receiving emails indicating that it is required, there is no required consultation for an MZO. Regardless, staff undertook a robust consultation program, including signage on site, flyer distribution, a dedicated website, a community liaison, 2 public meetings held on March 9th, 2021 and April 6th of 2021. Slide. Based on input received through that consultation process, the following changes were made to the proposal. Now, these proposals don't all impact zoning, but I wanted to provide them to you, particularly if this is the first meeting you've ever been to about this proposal. One of the changes was a reduction in the unit count from 64 to 60, and that was partly based on input that we heard about increasing the size of the amenity areas, including the dining area and lounge. Increasing the size of the tenant support area, integrating waste storage into the building and increasing its size to support tidy operations, the retention of 1 additional mature tree by adjusting the siting of underground utilities. Again, that goes back to that official plan policies of trying to do that, trying to preserve as many trees as possible. Slide. Increasing lighting along site walkways and within the outdoor amenity space, application of the Toronto Green Standards, such as through bird-friendly glazing. What does that mean? That means that we're putting up windows that will help ensure that birds can see them and not fly into them and be injured. Increasing the width of the adjacent sidewalk to 2.1 meters. Extending concrete bus platforms on Comer Avenue and Willowdale Avenue to the standard 16 meters and state of good repair to these platforms. Improvements to building cladding design to the east and west modules, the addition of cedar cladding on the east and west elevations, the addition of colored window coverings. Again, all of those last 3 in particular, not related to zoning, but I'm providing them to you so you're aware. Next slide. Relocating bicycle parking to the northeast portion of the site, improvements to circulation throughout the site with upgrades to on-site accessibility. And we'd heard some comments about improving accessibility, and that's what we did. Additional landscape areas along the west side of the building adjacent to the open space. Landscape improvements along the north-south pedestrian walkway. Reconfiguration of the wood fence along the south side of the site so that 2 clusters of spruce trees will be located outside of the fence. and the addition of seating areas on the building entrance along Cummer Avenue and reinstatement of benches along the north-south pedestrian walkway. So all of that work had taken place, and a request for the minister to make a a zoning order was requested of the province and of the minister. Subsequent to that, we held an additional public meeting on August 12th, 2021. But to date, the MZO has not yet been made, but it's still possible that the MZO could be made. There's no distinct timelines about the making of an MZO. It could still come any day. However, as staff, we were directed to pursue a municipal rezoning process. So on February 15th, 2022, Planning and Housing Committee directed staff to pursue a municipal rezoning process to permit the necessary relief to the zoning bylaw to permit the proposal. So that direction was endorsed by City Council on March 9th, 2022. So again, that means your elected officials took a vote and directed staff, including myself, to advance through the process, and that's part of what this meeting is about today. The proposal presented and the relief required includes all changes made as a result of the previous consultation. So nothing we've done so far has been lost. It's a continuance. So I've been talking a lot about what's happened so far, the planning framework, and trying to give you some information about the zoning, the policy, etc. But I haven't actually talked about yet what the development is actually proposed. And particularly if you're new to this, you'd probably want these details. So here are the primary details. What is proposed is a 3-story apartment building with a height of approximately 10.5 meters. Now I want to highlight that height. Again, that policy of the official plan saying 419, saying that it has to be related to what's across the street. What across in the zoning across the street permits up to 11 meters. So 10.5 meters is related and it conforms to that policy. There are 42 bicycle parking spaces provided. Up to 60 new residential studio units are proposed. There's a shared kitchen, dining, lounge, and laundry facility. No net new parking spaces will be provided because parking is shared on the existing site, so no parking will be lost. Be staff offices, and overall, there'll be approximately 3,040 square meters in the building. This is the site plan. If you're not familiar with the site plan, basically you're looking at the proposed development from the sky looking down. Cummer Avenue is to the top of your screen. Willowdale Avenue is to the left of your screen. On the right is the existing driveway that leads into the site and some parking along that driveway, which will remain. You'll see next to that is some bike parking. And then next to that is the primary building, which says 3-story residential, 10.5 meters. South of that, it says rear yard. That will be fenced in and will be a fenced in amenity space for residents of the building, private for them, for that building. And you can see at the top, it says main entry, because that main entry opens onto Cummer Avenue. Again, that's something the official plan directed us that we needed to do in this kind of a proposal. Renderings, this is what an artist's rendering of what the proposal will look like if it's built. This view is from Cummer Avenue looking towards the south. One item I want to point out in this slide here is you can see the outline of the apartment building in behind it because the existing apartment building is taller than this proposal. Slide. This is an image projecting what it would look like from Willowdale Avenue looking towards the east across the remaining lawn. And this is an image of what the front door would look like. I want to highlight on this slide, again, it's not exactly what it's going to look like, but it's very close. One thing I want to highlight is that covered walkway leading to the entrance. Under the zoning, that is termed to be a pergola. I'm pointing that out for a reason, and I'll emphasize, I'll get to the detail of why I'm pointing that out in just a moment. So what are the reasons for the proposed zoning? What is it that they're looking to change through this proposal? So today, I'm a moment ago, I was talking about the zoning and the RM label, which says that apartment buildings are permitted on this site. Now, there's a previous zoning, an exception to that exists from several decades ago when the current development was built, And it's a site-specific exception that basically identified where the building was going to go, 42 meters away from the street, and that it was an apartment building for senior citizens. Second point there is that as proposed, the existing bylaw would require 6 parking spaces and 1 accessible parking space. But what is proposed and what would need to change through the rezoning and the purpose of this conversation, slide, is an apartment building for the general population located closer to the street. So the proposed change to use is from an apartment building for seniors to an apartment building for the general population with a setback of 6 meters rather than 42. No additional parking will be proposed and the existing parking will be maintained. Slide. Other items that are looking to be changed are there's regulations in the existing zoning that pertain to the size and dimensions of bicycle parking. The zoning also says a loading space would be required. And to that point I mentioned a moment ago, pergolas are not permitted in the front yard, and that covered walk entryway is considered to be a pergola. So what would need to change is the proposed building includes a stacked bicycle parking system which has different dimensions, no loading spaces proposed, and the entryway structure is interpreted as a pergola, so it would need to change. So in other words, what we're talking about is those last 2 slides, those changes. So it's not a lot of things we're talking about. We're not looking at land use redesignation to permit an apartment building. The official plan already says an apartment building is appropriate on this site. We're looking at these little details. So determining the public interest. As a planner, my responsibility is to determine the public interest. And this is a few slides about how I do it. First, I need to look at facts and figures, including details of the proposal and its physical context. For example, how big is the site? How tall is the proposed building? I also need to look at the law, including the zoning bylaw, which we talked about just a moment ago. I also need to look at planning policies, and we went through some of that, so that's part of the reason I went through that. And I also need to listen to people, including the applicant, city departments, people such as yourselves. And when I weigh all of those factors, I need to arrive at a recommendation which would go before City Council for a decision. So next steps, and the next steps that I'm providing here are simply related to the rezoning, not for the full next steps in terms of moving in, because the zoning hasn't been determined yet. It's simply about the rezoning. So next steps are there'll be a staff report with recommendations presented to the Planning and Housing Committee. You may depute verbally or in writing at that committee. If the report advances to City Council, you may depute again, but this time only in writing, and that's on May 11th or 12th of 2022. And if endorsed by City Council's decision would be appealable to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So that's it for me. I'm going to pass it back to Franca, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. So certainly lots of information this evening, lots to absorb, lots to digest, and lots of participants. So we're glad for that. And there's lots of information to get through here. I'm seeing quite a number of hands raised. I'm going to take a moment just to go back. I won't belabor it, but we will go back over because I notice also that there are some folks who are joining us and may not have access or may not be watching this on a screen. They may be only listening this evening. So a reminder that if you are calling in and listening to the meeting, you can also participate by raising your hand by pressing *3 and then *6 to unmute. And we are going to alternate between written questions as well as questions which are asked live by participants. A reminder, since I see so many hands raised, we really are going to try and get through as many as possible, and we're going to focus the discussion on parts of the presentation that you've seen this evening and around some questions around the rezoning. We will be just in the interest of time, asking you to form your questions in the form of a comment. I'm sorry, asking you to make your comment in the form of a question so that it can be addressed directly by staff. And then we'll move on to get to as many participants as possible. So we will work toward that. And with that said, I'm going to just open to the first name that I see displayed, and that is Bilal. I will read first names only, and we will get started that way. And I will ask Bilal for you to be prepared to ask your question. Okay.
Hello, everyone. You can hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. So my question is, what percentage of Toronto's homeless population will be served by this one proposal? And seeing as it took like a year and a half to get to this point, in the best case scenario, when is the movement going to be? And I would like to also state that this is a project that we need much more of, that this is situated in a residence in an area that can support it with proximity to Yonge Street. And yeah, so what's that timeline looking like?
Okay, thank you, Bilal. I think that question is for Abby. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So the earliest at this point that we would anticipate occupancy is likely the end of 2022, but we're obviously working towards a Planning and Housing Committee at the end of April, and then subject to that decision and on to Council, we would have a zoning decision, and then we will continue to plan, issue the RFP, and get an operator on board. So we're anticipating occupancy by the end of the year. It's 59 people who are experiencing homelessness who will be housed here. And as I think I said in my comments, we see over 8,000 people experiencing homelessness. So it's part of a bigger initiative, currently over 2,000 homes, which are due to open in 2022 to serve that population. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm going to go to the next question, the next hand that I see raised. We're going to start with these, and then we can switch to written questions, but we'll start with some more. And I see Stephen. Stephen, I'm going to unmute you, and please go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, hi there. Thanks for hosting this meeting. My name is Stephen Job. I'm a professional planner. I find this, just a little comment first, I find this location really auspicious because I've had the fortune to spend a lot of time at the Sisterhood of St. John the Divine, just east of here on Cummer. And this is a block, an institutional block that has always been a place of charity and love and support and healing. So to me, it's kind of auspicious. I have two questions for Abby, I think. The first one is, how did this location for this supportive housing project? And then the second question is, the more this is delayed, or if this is not built, what is life like for these 59 people who might otherwise live in supporting housing like this, but wouldn't be able to if this is not built? Thank you.
Thank you. I think I heard the first part of that question, which was why did we select this site? So we were looking at the right size of site. We were looking to see whether it was a neighborhood, designated neighborhoods, and proximity to transit and shops as well. Obviously, that isn't the focus of the discussion tonight. We really are focused on the planning and design elements. But we did look, and we used this similar criteria for all of the sites across the city that we're currently looking to develop as modular housing. To the second part of your question, the majority of the people experiencing homelessness in our city are currently living in our shelter system. There are also some people who are living outside, even throughout the winter, in bus shelters and in parks, but the majority of people are living in the shelter system right now, and so don't have their own private front door, don't have their own kitchen or bathroom facilities. And so that's why we think it's so important to create a quick, dignified and rapid response by providing supportive homes like these. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So another question. I see a hand raised Saeed. Saeed, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to voice my 100% support for this project, and I hope it can go through after much needed, after on a lot of unnecessary delays. And that's all for me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Saeed. So that's comment from Saeed. I think we're going to move on to the next comment. We heard a comment from Saeed in favor of the project. Now I'm going to go to Rocky. Rocky, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question.
Can y'all hear me?
We can hear you.
Beautiful. First of all, I just want to say that all things being equal, I am so supportive of these projects, and I think it's absolutely wonderful what the Rapid Housing Initiative is doing to house unhoused people in the city of Toronto. I happen to live close to another site in the city myself. It is absolutely fantastic. I have two questions. The first is, I know for the Rapid Housing Initiative, a lot of that was federal funding and it was very much tied to move-in dates. And there are certain timeframes, and that's actually why the city was pursuing the MZO on this file. So I just want to ask, like, is that federal funding still locked in place, even though we're having to go the slower rezoning route, zoning bylaw exception route? The second question I have is there, obviously I know you want to go through this fast, so there might not be time in this project, but is there any way we can get more units here? There are 8,000 people in the city who are homeless tonight. And Abby, you can check my figures. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Is there any way we can take advantage of these delays and maybe deliver on a little bit more housing for the people in the city who really, really, really do need it the most? So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rocky. So a couple of questions in there. One are connected to the funding and another about the initiative in general. So go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So this project is actually part of our modular housing initiative, not part of the rapid housing, so not funded through that particular program. It has received federal investment though, and as part of that, both the city and the federal government are keen to see the investment land and the homes open as soon as possible. So we have kept in, or we do keep in regular contact with our federal colleagues and updating them on the progress that we're able to make. So that at this point, we all remain committed to the funding of this project. In relation to the number of units that are being proposed for this site, we're still committed to the 59 units at this site. We're not planning to make any changes at this point to that, and just keen to see this project move forward and be considered at Planning and Housing Committee and at Council as soon as possible. But I would say though that it isn't the only site that we're doing. We're in the process of acquiring buildings and also opening new modular sites. And actually a couple of weeks ago, we just received an announcement for an additional $200 million of investment by the federal government into the Rapid Housing Initiative. And so we'll be rolling out additional projects over the remainder of this year. So like you, we do see the urgency and the scale of the demand, but not planning to add any more units to this site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we've had a few questions, and I'm going to stick with the folks who are calling in or who are participating by asking their questions live. But I am going to ask a favor. If you have had a chance to ask your question aloud, if you could please lower your hand. I'm still seeing some of the raised hands. If you don't mind, find that *6 button if you've called in, or find the little icon and lower your hand if you've had an opportunity already. Oh, thank you so much. That's really helpful. And now I will go to the next question. And the name that I see is Jim. Jim, I'm going to unmute you. Would you like to please go ahead and ask your question? Hello, Jim. Oh, having a little trouble hearing there. Jim Yuan? Are you there? No, we're not hearing Jim, so we'll see if we can come back. I'm going to move on to the name that I see is Frank. Frank, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question. Hello, Frank. No, having some trouble there too, Frank, Mara. Oh, there we go. Are you there? No, still having some trouble. Okay, apologies for that. We'll have to circle back. I'm going to move on to the next name I see, which is Elena. Elena, please be ready to ask your question. I'm going to unmute you now. Elena.
The first thing I'd like to say is that I'm very supportive of this project. I actually live right near some other supportive housing, and I think it's really great. It has really not affected my life whatsoever. The question I have is, given that we still have 8,000 people experiencing homelessness in Toronto, and we've seen these projects having so many delays, what's the city's plan to get more people housed faster?
Okay, a question about how to get people housed as quickly as possible. Abby.
Thank you. Well, I think that's exactly why we're here tonight, because we haven't received the MZO to date. As Matt mentioned, we're bringing forward a city-initiated rezoning application for this site. So that is the fastest way that we think we can create housing on this site, as we've discussed this evening. And then in addition to that, we have about 8 other projects underway across the city right now. They are a mixture of acquisition of buildings and renovation of those buildings, and also other modular sites. And in addition to that, we also have received some additional money investment from the federal government, and you'll be seeing more projects than those 8 rolling out later this year. So we continue to put our effort into maximizing the number of new homes that we have with supports in the City of Toronto. So right now we're on target for about 2,100 units by the end of 2022, and in addition also providing some Canada Ontario housing benefits as well to support people to move in to rental housing. Thank you.
Great. So I'm going to thank you, Elena, for your question. I'm going to move.
Do you mind if, sorry,
Oh,
Frank.
go ahead. Yes. Yeah, please.
The focus of the meeting, of course, is about the rezoning, but in response to Elena's question, I do want to say that there are other projects in city planning underway, including the Housing Now initiative, including working on as of right zoning permissions, for example, in certain areas of the city. I'm responsible for doing that in Yonge and Eglinton, for example. And there's other things that we are doing to get people housed. But yeah, again, the focus is on the rezoning tonight.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to keep moving, and the next name that I see is Natasha. Natasha, I'm going to unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question. Here we go, Natasha.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hi. I'm a local resident. I own a home about 1 kilometer from the site, and I have young kids. And I've been really concerned over the last couple of years about the number of people in the neighborhood who need additional support and who seem to be in crisis, and tents in the park across the street near me. So I really think that this is a good solution for people in the neighborhood who need housing support, and I'm really glad that this is going forward. I'm wondering about the 3 projects that have been completed in other parts of the city. And 2 are actually right in the neighborhood that we used to live in. And are you able to give any information on how successful those have been, and how they're operating, and how they've been received by the local neighborhoods?
Well, thank you. That isn't really the focus of the discussion this evening. Obviously, we're really trying to stay focused on the design and planning elements in the upcoming planning application for this site. We do have some information on our website about the operators for those, certainly the 2 sites, the modular sites at Macy and Dovercourt as well. We do have some information about that on our website, and also the 877 Yonge building with St. Clair's Multi-Faith, who are operating that, which is mid-renovation right now. So happy to provide more information to you about the outcomes and the evaluation and the success of those buildings. Actually, maybe there's one thing I would say is that to assist with the integration and the successful kind of operations of those buildings, we've worked to set up community liaison committee. So each of those buildings has a community liaison committee that kind of came together with key residents and stakeholders in the neighborhood so that we could ensure good dialogue between the operator and the community once the buildings were opened.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Natasha, for the question, and thank you, Abby. Let's do a couple of more questions in this format, and then we can perhaps pivot to some of the questions that have been coming in through the written. But I'm going to move on, and I see Anne-Marie. So Anne-Marie, I'm going to allow you to unmute, please, and go ahead and ask your question. Anne-Marie? Are you there? Okay, having a little trouble not hearing, unmuted, but Anne-Marie, we can't hear you. So I'm going to move on. I see another question, or a hand raised rather, from Housing Now. So I don't have a name, but it says Housing Now, and I'm going to unmute. I'm not sure who the representative is, but please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, it's Mark Richardson. I'm a volunteer with HousingNowTO.com. We track affordable housing development around the city of Toronto, and we have been involved in all the many meetings for this site that have taken place over the last couple of years. My question, I guess, is specifically for Matt. There was a timeline slide that was shown early on in the presentation. It's pretty clear from letters, public letters that have been filed by the Bayview Comer Neighborhood Association on the most recent item, PH 3113, about this, that they are looking forward to appealing the city's decision to move ahead to the Ontario Local Planning Appeal Tribunal should council choose to move forward on this site. I know there's a long backlog on this site. I won't speak to my personal feelings about Bayview Comer Neighborhood Association and their actions on this file, but there was a timeline posted. If an OLT appeal is filed against this, given the backlog at the OLT, how long would that selfish action by the Residents Association delay this project potentially?
Thank you very much for your question, Mark. And to be completely honest with you, I don't know. I don't control what the outcome is at the OLT. I don't control their timing. What I can tell you is it would add time to the proposal. It would be if there's a decision in favor of the proposal, it would be longer into the future. It is possible, though, that there could be no appeal and then it would advance more quickly. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Mark, for the question. I'm going to now go over to my colleague, Liz McCarty. We're going to start to take some of the questions that have been submitted through the written Q&A. Liz, what have you got for us?
Great, thanks, Franca. I've got a few questions here, so I'll read them out as is, and then we'll keep going. So I think this is a question for Stephanie. And Stephanie, when you pop on, maybe you can introduce yourself and then other members of the team can jump in as well. So I'm just going to read the question out as we've received it. Why is it that you are unable to tell us who exactly the tenants of this housing will be? Possibly the community would be accepting it if you did and stopped being evasive of who will be moved into them. If requiring harm reduction, though, why would you even consider doing this on the front lawn of a senior's residence and a long-term care home, and in the middle of a quiet neighborhood and across the street from a middle school, down the street from a few high schools?
Thanks, Liz, and hi everyone. My name's Stephanie Malker. I'm a manager of coordinated access at Shelter Support and Housing Administration with the city. So as you all know, the future tenants will include people who are either experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness who'll be moving into these units. And the approach that we use is really reflective of that dynamic experience of homelessness that people have. We know that people's experiences of homelessness are really complex, they change frequently, and so our tenant identification processes really reflect that. So, you know, we can't tell you right now exactly who the tenants will be, but we can tell you that, you know, we prioritize certain population groups. So, you know, people experiencing chronic homelessness will be prioritized, Indigenous people, women, seniors and aging adults, as to name a few, are the folks who would be prioritized for units in this building. When it comes to the comment about harm reduction, you know, we'll work with the housing provider who's successful to understand the supports that they provide, and we work really closely with them to match someone to that unit to make sure that they can provide the support. So if harm reduction supports are needed, the person will be matched and we'll make sure that they'd be really well supported by the provider who's successful in the RFP.
May I respond as well?
Sure thing, Matt.
Since this conversation is intended to be focused on the rezoning, I just want to point out that we don't zone for individual groups of people. So the zoning bylaw would either permit an apartment or it would not. We don't zone for certain age groups. We don't zone for certain races. We don't zone for anything like that. So when you're asking about who the tenants are going to be, you don't choose your neighbors and you don't zone for certain people either.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Thanks for that clarification, Matt. I've actually got a question for you now. So what were the reasons given by the province for not providing the MZO for this site at the same time as the MZO for other sites?
I don't want to speculate about what the province's reasons were. That is not my responsibility. So I can't give you an answer, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. All right, Franca, shall I keep going?
Yes, go ahead, Liz.
Okay. So, Abby, I believe this is a question for you. As the units will be small studios, I presume this would not be suitable for a single parent with a child, as it is adjacent to existing senior housing and long-term care. Will the tenants to this site also be those 60 plus in age?
Thanks, Liz. Because these are studio apartments, they will be for adults, single adults. We will not be indicating through the RFP whether we're only providing housing for women or any gender, so it will be open to all genders. As I indicated in my statement about the RFP, we're going to be looking for a provider who has experience of providing housing and services to older adults and seniors because of the proximity to the adjacent sites, but it will not be exclusively for that age group. And as I think Matt has already indicated, that really isn't related to the matter at hand, which is the discussion around the planning application. That is really a matter for us in the Housing Secretariat in relation to our RFP and choosing a non-profit provider.
Okay, great. Abby, just another question for you before I go back to Matt. Someone wanted to ask if people who are living and renting a room could apply for this program.
Stephanie is obviously, she's in charge of our coordinated access program. So anybody who's interested in getting supportive housing, the best way to do that is to get on the coordinated access list. But Stephanie, you might want to tell people where they can access that list and how they can get on it.
Yeah, so the folks who we're working with to prioritize for access to these units are people experiencing homelessness. So they're either people who are currently using our shelter services, emergency shelter services, or who are sleeping outdoors and engaged with a street outreach provider. So it's really targeted for people who are experiencing absolute homelessness at this point, given that high, level of need in the city. So if you are staying in a shelter or you are sleeping outdoors, then you'd be considered for access to one of these units.
Okay, great, thank you. Back to Matt. I think it'll start with you, and then we'll go from there. As most of the green space in front of Willowdale Manor is being utilized for this proposed project, is the city considering developing the green space to the south of the buildings with paved walkways, benches, gardens, and grassy areas that could be accessible to all tenants of all three buildings, as well as the community?
The only way I can respond to that is to discuss the proposal that is before us. And the proposal that is before us is for a 10.5 meter 3-story building that has benches and trees in the front yard. And in the backyard, it has a private amenity space specific for that building. And that is the proposal. Now, to the west of it, there will continue to be an open lawn with a series of trees. And to the south of it will continue to be the ravine with the Newton Brook Trail. So there's no
It's
current proposal. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to cut you off, Matt. Just it's Councillor Filion. So if there is one of the existing buildings that wishes to improve their site, or if the city parks department wishes to improve any of its property around here, I would be happy to provide funding to that. Any of those groups would just need to contact me.
Okay, great. Thanks, Councilor Filion and Matt. So Abby, I think this is a question for you to start, but let me know. With the rezoning, will the Community Liaison Committee still be applicable? The person has noted they've applied and would like to know if it is still a valid application, or does the person need to apply again?
Thank you for your interest in being a part of the Community Liaison Committee. You will not need to reapply. This is just another step in the process for us. So if we've received your application, your interest, we will carry that forward and focus it more closely to the time when we will be on site with construction, and closer to the time when the building will be open. And that's where we'll be in touch with you to set up the Community Liaison Committee.
Great, thanks, Abby. So Franca, let's go back to the hands up.
Sure, we can go back to the hands up, and I'm going down the list, and I see Sushil. So Sushil, I'm going to unmute you, and please go ahead and ask your question. Hello.
Hello. I just want to, convey my support for this modular housing development. We are dealing with a housing crisis right now, but as much as it is, really bad for middle class folks, it's probably even worse for, folks that are currently unhoused and who will be unhoused by the time this modular housing, I pray, gets built. But really the question I have is more to do with, I guess, the process of the meeting, namely when it comes to remaining respectful, when it comes to conversation, when it comes to questions. Why are we allowing, questions that very clearly do have a classist tinge to them, and questions that are very much so focused on othering the people that will be living in these buildings? Why don't we consider those questions disrespectful? I would love to understand that. And also questions where people kind of begin with like, I'm a homeowner, and as a result, their opinion is worth more, as opposed to the renters that live in Willowdale. So that's my question. Like, where do we draw the line in terms of what's disrespectful and what's not disrespectful, and especially considering the context here. in terms of who we're talking about, who's going to be moving into these buildings. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sushil. I think I might ask anybody to, perhaps the counselor might want to give an opinion, or perhaps Matt, you might like to refocus us on the zoning. Counselor.
Yeah, I mean, community meetings, people express their views. They don't always do them in ways we would like. I would say that this meeting has been, people attending this meeting have been far more respectful than has been the norm on this subject. So I think we're doing pretty well tonight.
Thank you. Matt?
I would like to add that I believe, at least I hope, I understand Sushil's question. However, we don't want to be redacting or editing anyone's comments. People are free to ask whatever question that they want, and then we will respond. And drawing the line about whether it's respectful or not, I mean, it's a challenging thing, and I'm going to point out one specific one that I can see in the Q&A right now. There's someone who has asked, and I'm going to read it, can the rezoning be dedicated to senior homeless people rather than the general population? I'm going to assume that that person doesn't mean that in a negative or difficult way, but unfortunately the answer to that is absolutely no. We are not going to rezone for a certain age of person. We're not going to say it's only young people. We're not going to say it's only old people. We're not going to say it's a certain type of person at all. It's either permitted for an apartment building or it is not. And I'm saying that from the rezoning perspective. Once the rezoning is in place, an operator, and working with the housing secretariat, they can choose who's going to live there. But there's no reason, once they've lived there, if someone else needs a home, to say, sorry, you can't live there because you don't meet an age criteria or some other challenge like that. So from a rezoning perspective, the answer is no.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go on. We'll do another question or two that from raised hands. The next name that I see is Talia. So Talia, I'm going to unmute you. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Talia. I'm a resident of Toronto, and I just want to fully voice my support for this amazing project. I'm sincerely hoping that these tiny changes in zoning do not continue to hold up the process, as there are far too many unhoused people in Toronto who could benefit from this project.
Okay, so some more feedback in support of rezoning this for this modular housing at this location. I didn't hear a specific question, so I am going to just acknowledge Talia's comments, and I think we're going to move on to the next question. And I do see Eric. Eric, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Eric, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So I just want to take a moment to reflect on the fact that this meeting shouldn't really be necessary. I mean, if all had gone well, the Minister of Housing would have issued an MZO for this project, and these homes would almost be built by now. And so I have a question for the counselor, because a lot of well-housed individuals in this neighborhood have decided that they're going to make it their prerogative to steal housing opportunities from people who desperately need it. And we cannot build a society that actually helps the people who really need it when so many barriers can be erected in such an arbitrary way. And so how does the City of Toronto in the future ensure that its processes allow the delivery of these housing options faster in the future without so many new meetings, when the province doesn't go the way that we want to from an MZO standpoint? Like, what could the city have done to move this along faster without the help of the province?
Well, I think the simple answer is sorry, my dog is barking. I apologize. We could have started the rezoning earlier. I think we kept thinking surely the province will approve the MZO. They have it every other site. So there's no reason to think why they wouldn't here. So we kept waiting for them and finally gave up waiting. So I guess we had it to do over again. We would start the rezoning earlier. We really didn't think that would be necessary as it hasn't been elsewhere.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And thanks for the question. Oh, Matt, are you?
I just want to respond to Eric that I've been a planner for more than 10 years and I've never seen a process attempt to move as fast as this. We've had, at the same time as we are working on the rezoning, a preliminary review of the site plans underway, and at the same time, work on construction of the modules is also underway. A typical process is you'd go through a rezoning, then you'd go through a site plan, then you'd go and procure what you're needing to do. All three things were happening at the same time. So we were moving as quickly as we could. In terms of what could change, if you want my opinion, I will tell you that the current zoning bylaw 569/2013, if, and this is an emphasis on if the old 7625 exception from decades ago no longer applied to this site, we would not be having this conversation. So the two things that are holding it up ultimately are the setback from the front yard being so as large as it is, and the specific detail that this site is for apartments for seniors only, which again is not something we could even contemplate today.
Okay, thank you. So before we keep moving, as there do seem to continue to be a lot of hands raised, I'm just going to acknowledge a couple of things. One is I would like to thank everybody who has been participating and asking the questions live for the tone. And I'm also identifying that there has been quite a few questions that we've been going through. So we really do thank all participants for joining this evening and for making your views known. I'm going to just acknowledge that there are also many comments in the chat, and not everything which has been put into the chat, or rather the Q&A, is able to be read aloud in terms of a Q&A, but everything is going to be noted. So all of the comments will also be captured in a note and a report on the engagement process and on this meeting. And so if you feel that your comment needs to get captured and perhaps you don't feel comfortable saying it aloud, or perhaps there is not a question or not an opportunity to ask it, and the comment is more in a comment form, so we're not giving it to a specific staff person to respond to, I do want to identify that those comments will be captured into a written report. So just a little comment about a couple of items there, and thanking everybody for their participation this evening. And I think we also will go back to the questions that I see, and I see a hand raised from Kathy. Kathy, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Franca.
Yep.
I've got some questions to ask about the zoning specifically. Matt, I'm concerned, but because as you know, I'm involved with TCHC and our accessibility projects. The drawing that was presented tonight does not show the Wheel-Trans drop-off, and it needs to show that as part of the project. We spent extensive amounts of times getting that hammered out, and I'd appreciate it if it be corrected. And second of all, I know from experience with TCHC, many of our projects take 7 to 9 months to get through zoning. How is it that the city is, now that the MZO didn't go through, how is it that the city's going to move this project ahead and with the zoning? And is it not a conflict of interest for the city to be checking the zoning on its own project? Does that not represent a conflict of interest? I just don't want it to come back and bite us later.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Over to you, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. I appreciate the question. I want to once again focus us on the rezoning. The Wheel-Trans drop-off, I remember going through that. That's part of the site plan, not part of the rezoning. The image I was showing, what it's called is a simplified site plan, and it's simplified for the purposes of being included in a staff report where once it's made so small and printed in Word, you can only put so many details on it. So it's a simplified one. We haven't lost the Wheel-Trans pick up and drop off. And accessibility, we've continued to hear, including from yourself, because I've heard you at 3 of these meetings now, it's very important and we will ensure that the Wheel-Trans is there. But again, it's not a zoning question. The conflict of interest question, I'm not sure how to answer that question. The city is the one who decides what's appropriate in zoning, and I myself, as a registered professional planner, am required to act independently. I can tell you in my career, I have once refused to go in support of a rezoning because I didn't believe that I could do it. So I have to act independently and demonstrate to and convince myself that this is an appropriate thing to do. Again, our role and my role as a planner is to ensure what is appropriate zoning and to make a recommendation before council, but ultimately the decision on this in this process is through your elected officials.
Okay, thank you, Matt. We still have a lot of hands to go through, and so we're going to continue on. I'm going to just note the time. It's 8:20. The meeting is scheduled to go until 8:30, but we can check in and continue to ask the questions, get questions answered. I'm going now to go, I see Nathan. Nathan, I'm going to unmute you. Please go ahead and ask your question. Hello, Nathan?
Hi, my name is Nathan Gomes. I'm the president of the Bayview-Cummer Neighborhood Association. I want to be clear here that our neighborhood will continue to defend our seniors and the green space that they enjoy. We're going to continue to protect the site-specific exemptions that protect them from this development in our community. We do not think that this whole choir ahead of us that before me was, in any way indicative of our community. I don't know how many Willowdalers were actually on this call ahead of time, which is concerning to me. And I want to reiterate here that, we will continue our move forward and we will continue to challenge you at the Ontario Land Tribunal on this, and we will continue to defend our community. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay.
May I
Yep,
respond? Thank you very much for your comment, and I appreciate you providing a different view than what we've heard so far tonight. And I've also seen emails from you, so thank you for continuing to be involved in your community. I do want to say regarding the comment about who was here and where they were from, planning and part of my responsibility to consider the interests of the local community, the region, and a wider community as well. Planning is at several different scales. We have a city-wide housing crisis, or nationally even. We have a crisis for homelessness. People need to be housed. We know some of those people are living in the community today. So I need to listen to things that what you have to say as a local resident. I also have to listen to what people say across the city, and people could be calling in from even further afield. And it would be my responsibility to weigh those different scales. All of those opinions are welcome and need to be heard.
all right. Thank you, Matt. And I'm going to go to the next hand that I see. So just to identify also, there's, you know, we've got lots of hands and lots of names raised, and we're just chugging along here. Difficult to know, impossible to know what the next question will be. So just going to continue to go that way. And the next name that I see and the next person that I'm going to ask to come forward and ask your question is Lily. Lily, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question. Hello?
Oh, I think I hit it by accident, but I just wanted to get some clarification on the MZO application. Was that actually denied, or is that still an open application that the city is waiting for a response on?
Sorry, I feel like I'm now skipping Franca directly. It's not an it's a quirk. It's not an application. It's a request. The city council has made a request asking for the minister to make a minister's zoning order. So there's no timeline. There was no rejection of it. There was no acceptance of it, and there was no ask. So there's three ways. It could be accepted, rejected, or accepted with modifications, and we don't have an answer on any of those three. So it's possible that it still could be made at any time.
Okay, so if that happened, that they approved it, then the city's application that they're now just commencing would just be withdrawn, I guess.
Well, to clarify, because it's a city-initiated rezoning, there's no application. We're simply pursuing the city's rezoning as we would normally do, and as we do across the city, and is our responsibility as staff. So we would just potentially cease advancing that process if the MZO was issued.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question, Lily, and thanks, Matt, for the response. We are getting a little close to time. It's 8:25, but we'll get a couple of more questions coming in. The next name that I see is Victoria. Victoria, I'm going to unmute you and please ask you to go ahead and ask your question. Victoria. Hello?
Thank you very much. I have two questions for Matt. One is, it seems I'm a resident of Ward 11. I'm a Willowdale resident. And my first question is, you were mentioning the very odd old site-specific zoning in place on the site. Was it at all possible to consider, and you'll be able to explain this easily, could you have gone a C of A route to try and do this in a quicker format? That's question one. The second question is, as I was driving up and down Willowdale Avenue during the period of the original meetings, there were innumerable signs saying, "Save our park." And I would like you to comment on the zoning if there has ever been a park zoning or a park designation in this area. So two questions for you.
Those are excellent questions. So the first one I'll answer is regarding the park. When I showed that map of the official plan, the lands are designated neighborhoods. That would be where, you know, if it was designated parks, then it could be a park. And then ultimately, if it's designated a park, it then actually has to be a park. It has to be owned and operated and signed and owned as parkland. It is not a park. It is not a park, period. The question.
And I'll just add, nor has it ever been used as a park, and I've represented the area for 40 years and have never seen the site used as a park. I'm sure maybe people have walked through it, people have sat in it, you know, but it has never been used as a park.
Thank you, Councillor. I didn't know that history, so I appreciate that. Regarding the Committee of Adjustment, we did think about that and we did consider it, but ultimately there's two reasons why we made the decision that it needed to go through a rezoning rather than a committee of adjustment. So ultimately, to go through a committee of adjustment, one of the things that has to be is minor. Since the setback is currently 42 meters and we're proposing 6, that's quite a change. It's not going from, say, 6 to 7. So we decided that that was more than a minor thing. The other issue is that the current use limits it to seniors, and of course we were changing the use to general population. So it's a general rule whenever you're changing use that it's a rezoning rather than a minor variance.
Okay, thank you, Councillor and Matt, for that. Okay, noting the time, it's 8:28. I think this will be our last question. So I'm going to go to the last question. The hand that I see raised and the name that I see is David. David, yep, David. I'm going to unmute you. Please go ahead and ask your question. Oh, where'd you go? There we go. Go ahead, David.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to participate. For what it's worth, I am a Willowdale resident, and I'm glad to see Councillor Fillion here. I want to first express my support for this project since housing is a Willowdale problem and it's a Toronto problem. My question is, are there going to be TTC service improvements being considered to the area? Thank you.
So I don't think we have anyone from the TTC participating this evening. Perhaps, Councillor, I can ask you to represent the TTC this evening.
None that I'm aware of. The TTC goes through a process every year whereby residents can request improvements or changes in service. I haven't had complaints about this one that I'm aware of, but you know, we can always improve service. That's a good thing. There are no current plans that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. I think we're going to go back to the slide just to identify to folks. There were still, I just want to acknowledge, lots of other hands that remained up. We went through quite a few, but I do want to just say that there were some that we just weren't able to get to this evening in the allotted time. But as noted, any comments received, written comments will be incorporated into a report, and these will be factoring into the rezoning process that is being discussed. And here is a little bit of information. I'll read it aloud for those of you who are not seeing this on your screens. Perhaps you've called in. You can send comments or questions to Community Liaison, so COMMUNITY, Community Liaison, LIAISON, at LURA, which is LURA.ca. And you can also find information on the City of Toronto's site, toronto.ca/175-Cummer. There also is some information there, instructions on how to share your comments or speak to the Planning and Housing Committee. And that's available on the city's site for this project. And that is going forward Wednesday, April 20th. So I'm going to thank everybody for their participation this evening. And we really had a lot of comments and many questions and many people participating. Thank you for being respectful and for moving through all of this. And there are other opportunities to follow this project along. We hope you will stay in touch, and we hope you will continue as this moves through the process. Thank you very much, and have a good evening, everybody.